Welcome, everyone.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi there.
I think we're officially going to get started in a few minutes. We had close to 70 RSVPs for this happy hour, which is like awesome, and I'm excited for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like folks are still coming in. All right. And if you can, if you have the internet bandwidth and the personal bandwidth, if you feel comfortable leaving your cameras on, it always feels a little bit more human that way. I like it. If you can't or you don't feel comfortable, I totally understand. All right. Should we get going? Do you want me to give an introduction of the program or?
I can't even see how many people we have. Is it all right.
Seems like there's 16.
Oh yeah, I see that now.
Okay.
Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Artemis Happy Hour. I'm Alex Stockman, Artemis Ambassador in Montana. And I am happy to co-host this event with Missy and Jen Davis. Jen Davis is our presenter tonight, this evening, wherever you are, depending on what time it is where you are. Jen Davis is extraordinary. She is a master naturalist based out of Michigan. And I had my speech and then my phone died. Recently, she is with the National Wild Turkey Federation. That is not, where is it? Oh my goodness. Totally lost it, Jen.
That's
So
okay.
I'm just gonna wait, here we are. Michigan
Okay.
blah, blah, blah. Welcome, everybody. Michigan master naturalist, wild turkey fanatic, Jen Davis from the National Wild Turkey Federation. She'll share the saga of wild turkeys with you, and the topics tonight will range from the history of wild turkeys to the near disappearance and their recovery because of hunters and conservation, and life cycles, habits. Unfortunately, like calling over the internet doesn't work so well, so we may not get into that, but I'm guessing Jen has some resources to tap you into. So without further ado, Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. I also happen to be an Artemis ambassador as well, and I love these happy hours. I wish I could come to more of them. I'm gonna go through kind of a PowerPoint presentation that the National Wild Turkey Federation has that's mainly kind of our stock slide presentation, but I want to handle this in a little bit less formal of a fashion for you all. And if you wouldn't mind adding your questions and commentary into the chat, I think Missy and Alex might both be able to help me keep track of that so that we can address those at various different pauses, just so we make sure we kind of cover some of the content together. I did share my screen because I do have some PowerPoint slides. I know, bear with me. It's not going to be super boring, but can somebody nod or thumbs up me if they can see some turkey feathers? Okay, awesome. Fantastic. All right, so we're just going to roll through a little bit about the wild history of the wild turkey. And if you have been interested in turkeys at all, you probably will know some of this and be able to kind of share some thoughts about it as we go along. In North America, there are in the United States, there are 5 subspecies of turkey. There are 2 species, so we'll talk about the other one in a little bit. But in my region, Eastern wild turkeys, I'm in Michigan, so that's the only kind of wild turkey that we have here. There are also the Osceola, which looks very similar. I'm going to show you a range map here in a second, and we can talk over some of the differences if you're interested in that. The Rio Grande, again, similar, but a different subspecies. There are some hybrids that will happen between some of the subspecies, the Miriams, the Goulds. And then this is the other species of wild turkey that's in Central America, the ocellated, which looks a lot like a peacock to me. And people will do, hunters will do what's called the Grand Slam, where they will try to go and get all of the different species of what subspecies of wild turkey, some even to get this additional species, but it can be quite tricky. I'm really very much a taproot kind of person, so I'm very interested in getting multiple different Michigan species of different animals rather than all of the different subspecies of wild turkey. So this map is from 2009, which might be a little bit outdated. There might be a little bit of shift here and there, but if you see the green sections that are kind of in between different species, that's where subspecies, that's where you get that hybridization that happens sometimes. So various different species of turkeys that can interbreed will do that there. And that Osceola turkey is like only in Florida, just down that orange section down in Florida, but the eastern wild turkey is spread over the vast majority of the eastern United States. Ooh, okay. So questions about the subspecies? I know we kind of blasted through that fast. Anything popping up? Okay. So I know that I would prefer to have a hot little video of a woman talking about the history of the wild turkey, but this one's really succinct. So I'm going to try and share it with you. Hopefully we've got enough of the speed going that we can watch it. It's pretty short, but I feel like he does a pretty good job of giving a brief overview. So I'm gonna give Stephen Ranella just a little bit of time to talk for me. Let me know if you have any trouble with video or audio. Somebody wave me down.
Jen, there's no audio.
Okay. Then I might give you what he was gonna say, because I'm not sure how to give you the audio through Zoom. I give it
You
one
might
more
have to reshare your screen, and there's an option down at the bottom, Jen, that says share computer audio as well.
Okay, thank you, Carly. We'll try it one
Sorry.
more time here. No, it's all good.
While we're working on technology, if you could put in the chat where you're zooming in from, just maybe your city, state, or even just your state, that would be awesome just to see where everyone's from.
Will be awesome. Okay, I think I've got it. We'll try it again.
The wild turkey is a true American original. It's a bird that's native only to North America and Central America. They were first discovered by Europeans in Mexico in the early 1500s. The ancestor of the bird that will be the guest of honor at millions of tables this Thanksgiving was feeding people in Spain by 1520. In 1607, the domesticated birds arrived back here in the United States and were raised to feed the colonists. If turkey was indeed served at the first Thanksgiving, there's some debate about whether that bird would have been a domesticated bird from Europe that has made its way back to the U.S., or if it was an eastern wild turkey, which were common in the woods and fields of Massachusetts. What we do know is that by the late 1800s, this grand game bird had been completely wiped out in all of New England, as well as New York, Ontario, Ohio, Indiana, Delaware, and New Jersey. By the 1930s, the wild turkey, once abundant throughout much of the U.S., could only be found in rugged portions of Appalachia, in inaccessible southern swamps, and other extremely remote plots of land. Some estimates put the continental population at less than 30,000 birds, a victim of market hunting subsistence hunting, and widespread habitat destruction. Then, in 1951, a South Carolina wildlife biologist named Duffy Holbrook captured a single wild turkey hen, and that became a milestone moment in one of the greatest conservation success stories that this nation has ever seen. Today, there are more than 7 million wild turkeys in the U.S., ranging across our woodlands and river bottoms. And at a time during that recovery, only a handful of states had enough turkeys to afford a hunting season. But now you can hunt turkeys in 49 out of 50 states, plus in Canada and Mexico. Now, all Americans have the opportunity to pursue one of the wiliest game birds. Every hunter can experience the thrill of watching a gobbler in full strut and the disappointment of having their Thanksgiving dinner stay just out of shotgun range. The sporting community must protect and preserve habitat if we want to keep populations of wild turkeys and other species at stable, huntable numbers. We have to remember that every time a hunter buys a gun or a bow or a box of shells, a portion of that money goes to support your state wildlife agency to manage the land and protect our natural resources. The National Wild Turkey Federation raises money to match with these funds and contribute to conserving habitat for turkeys and other species of wildlife. Hunters can help even more by joining organizations such as the National Wild Turkey Federation and the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. By getting active with these groups, we can help ensure that we continue to have huntable populations of wild game, and also so we can continue to have land upon which to hunt them. If you want to find out more about the history of wild turkeys and wild turkey restoration projects that are taking place today, pay a visit to the website of the National Wild Turkey Federation.
So, shameless plug for National Wild Turkey Federation, but also for the Pittman-Robertson funds that are feeding into conservation that all of us are putting into by buying hunting gear, ammunition, firearms, buying hunting licenses, and participating in the process. And that was kind of a blast over of the process of what happened with the turkey, with the wild turkey. It was a really popular food bird, and we had in this country what's called market hunting, which means that hunters would hunt in order to put food onto people's tables. That was a part of what people would buy at the grocery store, or their version of the grocery store, for a long time. And so both deer and turkey and many other species had pretty significant declines as a result of that. In Michigan specifically, where I'm at, they were extirpated by 1900, almost completely. And that had in part to do with that market hunting, but also to habitat destruction. And I will say the images in this stock slide presentation put a lot of that onto timber harvest, which was real common where I'm at. But it also had a lot to do with the draining of swamplands in the Midwest, where we were trying to make areas habitable that hadn't been before and passable for human populations, as well as fire suppression, which changed the landscape quite a bit. Also, that unregulated market harvest did a big number on turkeys. Some of the recovery of the wild turkey happened a little bit due to the depression and shifts in populations away from rural centers into more urban areas, which gave some of those remote locations a chance to begin a little bit of recovery, at least in those areas where the turkeys were not extirpated. In areas where turkeys were extirpated, efforts to recover them began with things like trying to hatch wild turkeys in captive situations, as well as trap and transfer attempts that did not take off very successfully. The turkeys just were not able to reproduce in the wild when they'd suffered too much trauma. But the invention of a cannon net, which I've got a little video of how this operates, it's pretty amazing, allowed the trap and transfer of turkeys in a way that ended up being really successful and is the reason that we've got the turkey recovery that we have. So this one does have audio. I'm going to see if I can turn it down because it's basically just a big bang. Do be prepared for that. You'll see some turkeys off in the distance feeding, and then a net's going to come out over top of them. It's pretty amazing. and they freak out for a little while, and then they actually start to kind of stop moving around so much once they realize that they're trapped. The researchers go running out into the field so that they can, and nowadays usually what they're doing is banding them or putting backpacks, little backpack monitors on them so that they can do some telemetry and figure out where they're going or record when they've been harvested or when they've been found. But at the beginning, they were just catching them in these nets so that they could crate them up, and they were doing all kinds of interstate transfers. Almost all of the turkeys in Michigan came from an initial population in Pennsylvania. So the National Wild Turkey Federation was involved really early on those interstate transfer agreements and getting negotiating those deals, because as you can imagine, the states that had turkeys were feeling rather protective of them, and the states that didn't have any were really desperate to get their hands on some and start the restoration process, especially once we realized that it was working. It also kicked off a lot of research and conservation work on habitat. So, and this, again, this presentation is a little bit old, but turkey numbers are topping over 7 million today. There are some areas where there's some difficulty with nesting habitat, and efforts are being made to make sure that we are keeping the turkey numbers high. Habitat is still a concern as areas get developed, as fire is still being suppressed, as invasive species move in. Making sure that we've got a careful eye on conservation of that habitat is still really vital to keeping turkey numbers high, even though it is a fantastic success story. And again, all of that conserved habitat and research is being funded by excise taxes and organizations that match those dollars with fundraising. In Michigan, it was not until the 1950s that Allegan County was repopulated with 50 birds that were captured by net in Pennsylvania and then purchased actually by the state of Michigan to begin that restoration effort. Questions about the repopulation of turkeys? Is there anything popping up in the chat that we could talk about? Have a little pause.
Vicki Burns has just a statement. She said, "When I bought my farm, there was a ton of them here. Now I hardly see any."
So that's an interesting observation. I feel like I have noticed that I hear anecdotally from people in suburbia that they're seeing more and more and more turkeys, and from people who live in more rural areas that they're seeing less. And I suspect that a little bit of that has to do with limitations on some predator habitat or on some predator access in those suburban areas, but I'm not sure. Do you have an idea, Vicki, about why you think that might be?
And Vicki, feel free to unmute and just chat with us. She called the game warden and they said crop chemicals are killing them.
Oh.
The crop chemicals, they follow behind when the tractors and stuff spray the fields, and then the turkeys are eating the corn, the soybeans, and it's really minimizing the population.
Yeah, I imagine that that's happening too in their poults maybe, or when the hens have nests, because I feel like that spraying is happening pretty early in the season. I'm not a farmer, but if I had to guess, that might be also when the population is pretty vulnerable. I kind of wish that I had a turkey biologist who could come and talk. Maybe I'll see if I can strong arm a turkey biologist to come and give us a happy hour that's all about the nuts and bolts of the biology.
That was one of the reasons I bought my farm, because when I came here to look at it, there was deer and turkey in the yard, and I have 10 acres, and I just fell in love with the place. And then I've had plenty of turkey here up until about a year ago. And I think I saw one on one of my game cameras over the winter, but just one. I mean, ton of deer, but hardly any turkey. So
I imagine, yeah, I imagine you might. It depends on how large your property is. And you said 15 acres?
10.
10, yeah, you may be able to find that there's some things that you might be able to do on your property, like identifying if you've got really good roost sites or if you've got really good nesting habitat, and sort of prioritizing that to kind of create a little safe space for them.
Yeah,
So
there's
they'll
a
want
lot.
to be on your property.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of timber, so
Yeah.
they do have, hiding places and such, but
Nice.
as far as the chemicals and I mean, there's not houses like close to me, so it's not like the population's moving in and running them off or whatever. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, maybe at the end we'll have some more time to chit chat about ideas. Yeah.
Right.
There's a
Thanks.
question. There's a question from Ashley. Do you know if there are any differences among regional turkey populations based on where they came from in restocking, similar to what we hear about deer?
So with the wild turkeys, from what I understand, the transfer between states was attempted to try and keep with the subspecies that were already thought to have been in that area. So Easterns moved between states where there were Easterns, and so on and so forth on the subspecies, in order to prevent some of that. And my guess is that some of those early failures of trap and transport didn't just have to do with the method, but may have also had to do with trying to move subspecies from a habitat that they weren't into a habitat that they weren't comfortable with or familiar with. Yeah. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about the life of a turkey, the year of a turkey. So this starts in the fall, even though right now we're kind of in that winter/spring cycle with the turkeys. But in the fall, when the turkeys are getting a little bit more mature, usually what will happen is that the flock will differentiate between the adults and the juveniles, and the male turkeys and the adult males and even the young, nearly adult males will kind of group up into packs. And then the really young juveniles and the hens will be in their own little crews, cruising around. In the winter, they're really focused on foraging and survival. And then the male turkeys start to do their dominance establishment, where you see them kind of strutting around with one another, fighting one another. That's what the spurs are all about on the turkey's legs. As they get into spring and they're starting to participate in breeding behavior, the male turkeys will actually have this, for lack of a better term, a big fat boob that they have built up in the center of their chest from eating and eating and eating, in order to focus their energy on mating. So they will eat a little bit across the span of the springtime, but as it gets later into the spring, they eat less and less, as they just rely on that energy that they've stored, almost like a camel. It's pretty awesome. I can't remember that. I think it's called a sponge is the technical term for that. And it allows them to really focus on chasing the hens around and sort of sorting out their dominance behavior. The hens are often focused a lot on eating and getting enough nutrition from a lot of insects in order to be able to make eggs, and in finding toms that they feel like are worthy of their attentions for nesting. Finding good nest sites with good nest cover. That's one of the things that can be difficult in terms of habitat. We found that in some of the areas, especially in the south, the nesting cover is not recovering as well in the springtime with too much drought. It's not able to get tall enough to cover the nesting areas from various different predator pressures. And once the turkeys have had, a hen turkey will lay eggs into her nest day after day until she's got what feels like a good sized clutch of eggs, and then we'll sit on them to hatch them. So a lot of times they'll be visiting their nest and going back out and breeding over the course of the springtime. As eggs get picked off the nest, she'll just keep laying more eggs until she's got enough to sit on and hatch. And then once those poults are hatched, they begin to grow really rapidly, but they really need an insect food source like most other baby birds in order to do that rapid growth, that high protein food source. So those grasses and pollinator habitats are also really important for turkeys. And the gobblers are kind of off doing their own thing, as the hens are spending their time with the poults, making sure that they're safe until they're old enough to be able to hop up onto the roost with the mom, with the hen. I think I've covered some of this already. When we're hunting in the springtime, we're trying to kind of reverse nature. We're calling at, like, pretending to be a hen, calling the tom in usually. But in nature, a tom is just gonna gobble and display and wait for the hen to come to him. When we are pretending to be a hen, we're pretending to be a hard to get hen and trying to trick him into coming to us, which is not really how the mating process is supposed to work most of the time. So we're trying to attract in that gobbler. When we hunt in the fall, it's a completely different kind of hunt, and we're going to be interacting with those larger flocks of birds. And so we're not going to be able to call them in the same way. Those hunts are generally used as a management hunt in areas where there are enough of a turkey population where they feel like the habitat maybe can't support that many. Not all states have that. Questions about their year, their life cycle? Nothing popping up. Okay. When we go to identify turkeys, we want to make sure that we're able to tell a male from a female turkey or a hen from a gobbler, and to know what the legal identifiers are in our state. In my state, in Michigan, it's just has to have a beard, for an example. Some states require that you're able to tell in other ways what the difference between a hen and a gobbler. For ecological purposes, for conservation purposes, it's good to be able to tell a hen from a gobbler regardless. About 10% of hens will have a beard. This is an image that's sort of typical of a jake. So it's a turkey that has a little tiny beard. It has some of those bigger caruncles. You can see the snood up at the top of the head, and a little bump on the back of the leg. That's the start of a spur, but they do look a little bit hen-like to me at that size, at that stage. A gobbler or a fully mature tom turkey is going to have that longer beard and the big full fan that you can see, and is a little bit more large and impressive. The hen has more muted colors, and she's usually pretty significantly smaller overall, but unless you're seeing them together, sometimes it can be a little bit tough to tell. I always feel like they look a little dustier than the toms, and the coloration on the head is significantly less. She doesn't have the big caruncles. She doesn't have the snoot sticking up above her beak. Usually she doesn't have a beard, and her legs are smooth all the way down from the knee to the ground, where she doesn't have a spur sticking off of the back of her leg. Here's a little side by side of the gobbler and the hen head, where you can kind of see a kind of clear distinction between the intensity of the colors, the bumpiness of the tissue on the head, and the difference in the shape. Is that pretty clear to everybody? Okay. All right. It looks, I always am a little bit surprised. I know when I'm in the field, sometimes I'll see a turkey and I'll get excited and I'll think, oh yeah, it's definitely a tom. And then you give it a few seconds and you realize, no, it's just a big hen. But it could be the excitement playing tricks. So it's good to be able to tell the difference. This is just a close-up of the beard and the large size of the turkey, of the tom turkey. If you'll notice, he looks really big in body, but the vast majority of what we're seeing is feathers and space or air between the feathers, and the body is actually quite a bit smaller, and you can kind of see where the wing connects with the body. There's that little point, and that's where those vital organs are kind of located on the turkey, which is especially important to understand if you're doing archery hunting. when we're scouting or looking to figure out where the turkeys are, we want to kind of try to figure out where they're roosting if possible, which means going out in the evening as the sun's setting or in the morning as the sun's coming up, and trying to find out what trees they're using, because they're sleeping up in those trees on those horizontal branches. We're also looking around for their scat. The male turkeys, and this is one of my favorite trivia facts about turkeys, the male turkeys poop in a J. And the female turkeys do not. They poop in a poop emoji. And I don't really understand the physical structures that are making that difference, but I suspect it has something to do with egg production. But pretty consistently, if you're seeing J-shaped scat on the ground, you know there are male turkeys there. This isn't a great picture of scratching. Turkeys will feed by looking underneath the leaves, so they'll kind of take their talons and scratch back and forth to kick the leaves back and find the tasty niblets that are under there, little plants that are emerging or little insects that are emerging. And you can often see that throughout the woods if you've got turkeys feeding there. The tracks are pretty distinctive. Here in Michigan, we have sandhill cranes, and their tracks look very similar. So knowing the habitat needs of those two species and trying to kind of suss that out is really helpful. And there are some subtle differences between the two. And once you've seen a lot of turkey tracks, you start to get comfortable being able to tell the difference. The hen's tracks are significantly smaller and less dense, less deeply pressed into the ground, in part just because she's a lot smaller, and it gets easier to tell the difference as you look to, again, a lot of tracks. I find maps to be super useful. I don't use a lot of physical maps these days. I tend to use apps. Michigan has a My Hunt app that allows us to go online and look at public land in the state of Michigan. Google Earth is your friend. If you're interested in a paid subscription, there are services like Onyx or HuntWise. I feel like we could do a whole hour just talking about pre-scouting online. Maybe that's something for another time. When you're, again, doing that scouting and you're looking for that roost tree at night, you're going to use your ears as well as your eyes. You can use turkey calls to call to them, and a lot of times they'll answer back, especially the male turkeys in the spring. They'll do what's called a shock gobble. So you can shock them into gobbling back to you. That's why a lot of times you'll find there's crow calls or owl calls that you can use when you're trying to locate those turkeys. I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritty of the habitat, but a lot of times fields will help. You can see them pretty well when they're out in the fields feeding. Clearings in the woodlands are often really helpful, but your habitat might be a little bit different depending on where you're at, exactly what their needs are. They do like to use 2 tracks or old logging roads to travel, just because it's easy traveling. And in the spring, the towns really want to be able to show off. So they're looking for those open spaces where they can kind of strut around, similar to a lecking ground for grouse. We talked about the locator call. You can also use coyote calls. You can also slam your car door or honk the horn or sneeze really loudly. They will often respond to that. They get pretty fired up in the spring and will respond to almost any loud noise. Oh, so and this slide is mostly suggesting that you don't go out really at the beginning of season or during early season and just use your turkey calls a whole bunch and educate the turkeys. That you should try not to use those more than you need to. I don't know. I feel like that ends up becoming a personal choice on what you feel comfortable doing in your area. If you overcall a whole bunch and turkeys begin to associate humans with the turkey calls, it could do you a little bit of harm when you're hunting, for sure. Hunting strategies and regulations are going to vary pretty widely from state to state, and I feel like we could sort of talk as a group about what other folks have found to be useful in their areas. The regulations are going to be significantly different state to state, just because we have different populations and different needs. So it's just really important to make sure that you're checking on those regulations, the timing of when you're allowed to hunt, the way that you can tell what a legal bird is, the amount of birds that you're allowed to take really is different pretty significantly state to state. I want to hear from you your stories, recipes, questions, thoughts. I feel like everyone has a turkey tale of some kind.
Someone
Anybody?
did
Yeah, there is a
volunteer a
delicious-
recipe. Oh, sorry, Missy.
Sorry, I was just gonna say there is a delicious looking recipe that already posted up there. Meat eater's
Oh.
recipe of turkey schnitzel and hollandaise
Nice.
from Kelsey with a recommended swap of jalapeno kettle chips instead of panko.
Oh man, that
Yeah,
sounds
highly recommend.
killer.
Super good.
Awesome.
I want to say I was apprehensive to hunt turkeys just until recently because my family doesn't like Thanksgiving dinner. They're not a big fan of the roasted turkey. And so I was like, why would I hunt turkeys? And then I went out and did it. And it dawned on me that I can make a turkey breast or a turkey leg like I do chicken. Or I can grind it, or I made it into a curry, or I did this, or I did that. And I was like, oh, I don't have to roast it. You know, it was just so ingrained in me about roasting this big turkey. I'm like, oh, no, this is going to be fun. And I have really enjoyed turkey hunting since my brain swapped gears on what turkey is and what I can do with it as a food source.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I think that roasting a wild turkey is maybe the worst thing you can do to it. The legs and the breast meat are so different because they actually run around and use their legs so much.
Speaking of that, my first Thanksgiving trying to do turkey, I separated the breast meat and the legs into two different crock pots. I at least had the foresight to do that, but cooked them at the same length of time and temperature. So breast meat was done. We ate that for Thanksgiving. By the time we cleaned up, had dessert, cleaned up from that, and everybody was getting ready to leave, the legs and thighs were done. So it took a lot longer.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
One of
looks-
my goals in my hunting is to get a turkey. And it drives my fiance nuts. He's killed turkeys before. We go up northwest Montana, and there's usually like 5 years ago, there was turkeys everywhere. And I watched the Meat Eaters episode where he took 2 women turkey hunting and stuff, and I was just hooked. And I just wanted. Every time now since then, they're always on private land. We were or on the roads where I can't shoot them. But this last hunting season, I was able to. They were in the wild, and I was able to take a shot, and I missed, and I was so disappointed. I was so heartbroken. So, but it's still one of my goals is to get a turkey.
Yeah, I've missed. I feel like turkey fever is just as real as buck fever.
So we have another comment about taking a course with Chris Gavin, and he turned me on to using turkey feet to make bone broth. That's from Melissa.
Nice.
There's also a question about decoys, and maybe you can talk to that, Jen. So can you use decoys just to see if it draws them into your property?
So functionally, yes. I will say, I don't know legally. I know there's some regulation differences about decoys. In some areas you can use like moving decoys, in other states you can't use moving decoys. We can use movement from the wind in Michigan. I was going to say the private land thing is interesting. I did call a turkey off of an adjacent private property through a hole. Like I found a hole in the fence and I saw the turkeys on the other side of the property, so I set up on the side I had permission on, just past the hole in the fence, and I called them And it worked. They came through the fence. As soon as they saw the decoy, they came toward me. So I think it will work. I think you can do that. But again, check your regulations. Make sure that you're allowed to be using the kinds of decoys you want to use where you are. But I think so.
On that same line, has anybody had success using Jake or Strutter decoys? I've tried twice, and both times it scared the turkey coming in and actually hid in tall grass for 45 minutes. It was pretty impressive. But yeah, no success there.
Yeah, I'm starting to get shy about male decoys in my area, but I'm on highly pressured public land. And I think your setup matters. So if you set up the same way that other hunters are setting up, like on a field edge, and you've got your decoys just outside of the edge and you're just sitting just inside the wood line or whatever, I think they get used to seeing a certain thing and realizing that it's not safe. And so I think sometimes if you've got a lot of young jakes in your area, they'll see the bigger decoys and actually be afraid of getting beat up, especially late in the season. If they've been beat up by a lot of toms, they're just sick of it. They don't want it. But I think it's a little bit different everywhere. I think if you change your strategy a little bit, either relying on hens more or setting up in a wood line a little bit, or kind of making it look different than what other hunters are doing, you can start to see some different success.
There's another recipe here, I think wasn't mentioned, with pounding the meat down to about an inch thick, marinating it in Italian or Caesar, stuffing it and coating it with a shake and bake or a homemade coating.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like the breast meat is always the part that I struggle the most with. I really have fallen in love with like making tacos out of the leg meat or any variety of things. If you cook it nice and long, it'll just fall off the bone. But I run out of ideas with the turkey breast meat, so that's a good one.
I have a kind of funny story. A couple years ago, I went out early by myself. It was my first solo hunting trip to get a turkey. And so I live in North Idaho, and there's a lot out here. And I, got up the crack of dawn, get out there, get set up, and I didn't hear a single turkey at all. So I'm kind of defeated, get back in the pickup, and I'm driving back. And of course, as soon as I hit the road, there's a hen running across the road, and there was a tom chasing her. And as soon as I'm like, okay, where are they going? They ran onto private property. And so I'm taking a video of them, of course. Well, then I turn the corner and there's a mama moose and a baby moose. I was like, oh, that's so precious. This is great. I was like, so I started to kind of not care about the turkey as much, keep driving. I see a herd of elk, and there's an albino elk in the herd. Yeah. And I was just like, you know what? I think this was meant to be today. This is so cool. So I know sometimes it's frustrating, but at the same time, just like being out there, even by yourself, is actually really, really rewarding. So that's one of my favorite hunting stories. And I did not come home with anything besides the albino elk story. So
Yeah, a beautiful story. That's worth it for sure. Yeah. I'm surprised I haven't heard any really goofy turkey stories. I feel like turkeys have been up to some shenanigans. On the north campus of the university here in town, we actually had to have the Department of Natural Resources come and relocate turkeys off of campus because they were blocking students into their buildings. They were like getting in the doorway and intimidating students and actually getting on some of the buses. And they were really causing some trouble. Unfortunately, I don't see them out on public land all as much as I would like to, so I'm not sure why they've all moved onto campus.
Mary Lynn chimed in with Jake and Tom decoys are most successful early season or paired with hens. If you run into a non-dominant gobbler or a Jake, they can be shy. Hunting Eastern here in Tennessee, a single hen decoy has been most successful for me. My main use of decoys is to give him something to focus on so that he's not looking at me or for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna
I
try
feel-
to share
Yeah.
my turkey story. I'm hoping y'all can hear me okay, and I'm hoping y'all don't hear a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
But I have been probably attempting to hunt turkeys for I guess about 10 years. I went on a guided hunt on this property, and we could hear it coming in, and then it just stopped. So the guide was like, stand up and see if you see it, because it's probably just like right over the hill. So we were in the tall grass. It was taller than us. So when I stood up, the grass was still over me. So he's like, do you see it? And I said, yes, I see him. He said, okay, shoot him. And I said, with what? He said, you didn't stand up with the gun? I said, no, you didn't tell me to. I just stood up. So that has been the only gobbler I have ever saw in the woods before. And then my husband never had any interest in hunting turkeys because we just haven't seen any, because they're on the decline here anyway, or as it is. And until one day I was calling and I videoed one returning, gobbling back. And he's like, oh, so we do have turkeys. So then it lit a fire under him. So 2022, he shot his first turkey. We were supposed to go out that morning and our babysitter did not show up. So guess who got to go hunting and guess who didn't? And guess who shot their first turkey and guess who didn't? So I'm just like, that would have been like my turkey. Like that would have been mine. Just want to make that clear to the record that was supposed to be my turkey. But I'm a firm believer, and when the time is right, it'll happen. So fingers crossed, I don't have to wait too much longer.
Yeah. Oh, I have had turkeys come in without making a sound. I think especially if they've got a lot of pressure, they get to where they know that the gobbles are giving them away, and they'll kind of sneak around. If they think you're a real hen, they'll kind of sneak in on you. You gotta look alive.
Yeah, 50% of the turkeys that have come in quiet for me, I've been alerted to their presence by squirrels. So whenever you hear angry squirrels happening, because my rule is wait in the blind until I can't stand it anymore and then wait 15 minutes longer. Because usually as soon as I'm like, I'm out, and then I unzip and there they are. I'm like, well, crap. So when they're coming in quiet, yeah, I've had squirrels just doing all their chatter and then they come right in.
I love that.
Looks like Mary Lynn has an interesting story. She's killed a turkey barefoot.
Yes, tell us.
Here to share.
Looks like she unmuted, but we can't hear you, Mary Lynn.
Uh-oh.
Okay, what about now?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
All right, perfect. So I've told this story on the Artemis podcast, but so I am working on my Grand Slam, and I took my dad out to Texas to hunt some Rios, and him and I, we've been hunting turkeys together since we were 10 years old. So he's never hunted much out of state, so I figured I would give him the experience of a Rio, because a Rio turkey is a lot different to hunt than an Eastern turkey. So we go out to Texas, we do a semi-guided hunt. So they just basically show us the property and let us loose. And it came a torrential downpour the last morning before we, the second to last morning before we left. I mean, it was just a hard rain. We couldn't even get out there right at daylight because it was raining so hard. So it finally lightened up. So we get on this side by side. The guide takes us out to where he's going to drop us off. We get off the side by side and start just trucking it to where we saw a lot of sign, where we had some gobbling, a little bit of action the day before. So we're trucking it to where we were wanting to go. Well, I struck up a bird, and Rios are different than Easterns and Miriams and everything else. So you can call a Rio to you, from my experience, you can call a Rio to you. But if he gets past you and keeps on going, you're not going to turn that bird around. So we tried very hard to get in front of this bird, but he slipped by us. And in the act of doing that, I stepped down into a creek that was supposed to be a few inches, but it came up to my knee.
Oh.
So I soaked my socks. So we go back to where we were wanting to hunt. We sit down. I took my shoes off, took my socks off, because, you know, we were a couple miles in, and hiking in wet socks is no fun. So I hang my socks up and I hang my boots up, try to get the water out and kind of let them dry. So we're just sitting there for a second, and then Dad pulls out a call, and he starts to call a little bit. And he strikes a bird up probably about 800 yards away. Well, he took my socks and hung them away from me. I don't know why he did, but he took them and hung them like 15 yards away from me. So I couldn't get to my socks and I couldn't get my shoes. And he's starting to call this bird in. So I'm starting to just dig my feet into the red dirt and just hoping everything goes okay. Well, he moves away from me to try to get closer to this bird. So my dad gets up, he moves maybe 20, 25, 30 yards, and I'm just listening to him call this bird in. And he gets quiet, so I know what he's doing. He's letting the bird to finish come on in so he could take his shot. And I thought I would help him, so I pull out a call and just start clucking and purring just a little bit. Not a lot, just keeping that bird's interest. Well, for some reason, he decided that he was no longer interested in coming into my dad, and he gave him the middle feather and made a 90-degree turn and come straight into me. So all of a sudden I look up, this bird's getting closer, and I see this big old red head coming, gorgeous Rio, just strutting, just giving everything he's got. So I pick up my shotgun and I put the red dot right on his head. He gets to about 40 yards, put the red dot on his head and pull the trigger, and it clicked. And I'm like, oh God, what happened? So it's a semi-automatic shotgun. Well, what had happened was, when we got out of the side-by-side, I was so excited to get going and get after birds, I forgot to load my gun, because he didn't want the guns loaded while we were on the side-by-side. So I forgot to load my gun. So here I am pulling the bolt back and slamming a shell in it. And so it slams back forward, and I move. He's about 50 yards in, and I somehow get the shot, and he falls. I mean, my feet were white, just sitting out there in the daylight. I don't know how he didn't see my toes shining, but he falls. And my dad smokes a pipe. He smokes a tobacco pipe. That's his thing. So anytime we kill a bird, he sits there and he watches it flop, and he pulls his pipe out and he puffs on it, and then he gets up and goes and gets it. So he was in the act of pulling his pipe out and taking a puff on it, and then he just realized that I'm barefoot. We're in the middle of Texas. There's cactus and rattlesnakes, and he knows I'm about to jump up and go run after my bird. So he comes running and yelling at me, "Kid, don't touch that bird. You ain't got no shoes on." And so he comes and gets my turkey and brings it back. And so we're sitting there and we're laughing, and I told him what happened about the gun clicking and everything else. And so he's giving me a hard time about that, because y'all know how dads are. They like to give you a hard time about stuff. So he's giving me grief about that. And then I pull a call out of my pocket and just give a few yelps. And the next thing I know, we had 3 gobblers strike up maybe 300 yards. So I settle back down. Dad sits down maybe 5 yards in front of me, and I call in 3 of the most gorgeous Rios for him. And he had his choice of any 3 of them, and they were strutting and drumming and carrying on. And we doubled right there in the same spot without moving within just 30, 45 minutes of each other. So it was a fun trip, and it was a memorial trip. But I've even got a photo of that bird laying in front of me with my bare foot just kind of sticking up and looking at it, because never thought I'd kill a turkey barefooted, but I did. But turkey hunting is addicting. As soon as you get your first bird, or you don't even have to kill the bird, but as soon as you get that first answer and you play that chess match and that tom comes in reacting to you, it'll get you fired up and addicted more than deer hunting or anything else will. So it is definitely a disease and a fever. I thought a bunch of Rhode Island Reds today out picking in a field were a bunch of hens and slammed on the brakes. So I'm starting to get turkey fever around here too. So that's one of my funny stories. I've got a bunch, but that's probably one of my favorite funny stories was killing that Rio. But like, I've been hunting turkey since I was 10, so I've got so many stories. It's not even funny, but it's a blast. And killing your first bird or calling your first bird, just getting that interaction, it'll get in your blood.
It really does. It really does. I have not been hunting since I was a kid, and I started hunting for the food and chasing squirrels for such a long time unsuccessfully, and then started hunting turkeys, and man, I had there's so many stories about being in the field with the turkeys that it's hard for me to pick one to try and talk about, but there's something about, especially that gobble in the morning, in a spring morning. And if you can do it, I think it's good to do it with people that you love, but if you have an opportunity to do it by yourself, there's something just unbelievable about being out there by yourself and saying something into the woods that calls up that gobble. It just shakes you right to your bones. It's amazing. There's nothing like it. Oh.
And you're gonna mess up. If anybody has been a turkey hunter for a while and they've told you they've never made a mistake, they're either a liar or they haven't been turkey hunting long. Because if anything's gonna make you look stupid, it's these birds will make you look stupid. But that's half the fun. You got to be able to laugh at yourself, learn about it, and just try a different tactic and different things. But it is a lot of fun. I've got all kinds of crazy turkey stories and everything else. I absolutely love those birds.
Yes. I've got a lot to learn from you, Mary. I think we all could learn a lot. I feel like you've got the secrets.
I have more turkey calls than I have shoes.
I was talking earlier this week with some folks, and we were lamenting the fact that even though the turkey's brain is so small, they seem to be very smart. And I know that they're purely running on adrenaline and instinct and things like that, but they do seem to outwit me more often than not. That's they're funny animals.
So a game warden used to tell my dad and my uncles, because they did sketchy stuff when they were kids, they had to there was 10 of them, so they had to put meat in the freezer. So the game warden was always after them about something. But he told them one time, he goes, how do you outthink somebody that don't think? And I think about that with turkeys. How do you outthink something with such a small brain that probably don't think about it and just runs off of, instinct, and then it has no rhyme nor reason of why it does what it does. And it's I don't know, it's just crazy. It's fun. It's very addicting.
Yes, it is. Well, I think we're rounding out on the end of our hour. I'm gonna share my contact information just in case there's stuff that you want to talk about afterwards, that or if you want to get in touch with anybody in your area and you're having trouble, I'm happy to kind of help facilitate that. I'm in Michigan, so if you're looking for resources specific to Michigan, I'm a little bit more versed in those than the rest of the country, but I'm happy to help connect you with people who know stuff about the rest of the country. And I really just want to thank you all for talking turkey with me. I feel like having people who are willing to talk turkey is such a highly valuable thing. So I love it. Is there anything else? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being our host tonight and sharing this information. Any final gobbles that you want to Want to let rip or let us hear before we all sign off? Can you do a
Anybody?
vocal gobble?
Are you asking me or the group?
You or anyone?
I like to gobble from time to time. I don't know that it's very good, but somebody else has to
Yay.
gobble too.
I think it's funny because it did mute it a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't like non-voice sounds. So
Yes, yeah, Zoom is definitely my enemy. My gobble sounded perfect.
thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I'm the Artemis ambassador here in Montana. Missy, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are, and just as a resource too?
Sure thing. I'm in West Michigan.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. We will have another Artemis happy hour next month. So stay tuned to your social media channels. The recording of this, Carly said that would be on YouTube in the near future. So if you want to get the recording of that or rewatch it for any of that information, feel free. And yeah, here's to a great spring turkey season. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck. Bye-bye.
Thanks.